Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, every week, we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. This week, I continue my live journey across Uganda, understanding the complexities of what lies behind the flag. I am awake at the ungodly hours before the sun and before the cockerels start blessing the skies, to provide you a bit of an in-depth guide into how the last week's gone. But before I get there, a massive thank you to all our dear supporters and sponsors, many of which you'll hear from soon. If you too would like to be part of these 50 Shades of Brown discussions, while it couldn't be easier, simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can find this podcast and the entire repertoire of conversations so far. I truly hope you enjoy this remarkable podcast.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Hi, my name is Nestor Alfred, CEO of St. Lucia Citizenship by Investment. Think freedom. What comes to mind? Freedom to explore, to travel to any destination for work or play. Or is it freedom of expression? Being surrounded by the globally minded, those who care for society and environment. Every year, people from around the world apply for St. Lucian citizenship because they realize that real freedom is based on choice. Discover more about St. Lucian citizenship and how it's helping global Indians achieve more.
My name is Chitra Stern and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martiniale Resorts and Martiniale Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martiniale, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID. Have a great day.
And just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move.
Welcome back to our live voyage through Uganda. It is the ungodly hours before the sunrise, before the cockerels, and before even there's a slight stir of the cats in the Fairway Hotel. Yes, we're making it happen. We have been voyaging right the way through Uganda to really get an understanding of what really defines a nation, what goes behind the ideas of a flag, and more importantly, can a country stand its own beyond the arbitrary factors of skin color? Now, the last week has been absolutely fascinating, but before I even start my monologue of experiences, let me play this very short clip where I had the chance to meet with the president of the nation.
The African tribes have a way of Africanizing everything. If you come, like for instance, our Indians, my 4 Indians in my village, one was called Budara. That's what we were calling him, and that's what he was calling himself. But if you asked him what his original name was, Abdallah.
Abdallah.
So for us, we say Budara.
Would you honor me by giving me an Africanized version of my name then?
What's your name?
It's Rajan.
Rajan.
Yeah.
Rajana.
So from now on, it has been decreed by the head of state, everybody shall call me Rajana.
So Singer
Singer.
Was, I don't know how they corrupted Sikh.
Yeah. Singh, so it would be Singh as a surname, so it'll be Rajani Singer.
Aha.
I am now officially Ugandan.
Very good.
And if anybody argues, we have TV footage for that as well.
Very good, very good.
So yes, that is President Museveni, the president of Uganda. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions that surround, first and foremost, this whole idea of Ugandanness. I think the story of Idi Amin has been well told, well reminisced by many people across the globe, from the last King of Scotland through to the celebrations, all the anniversaries that will be taking place this year. But what I want to do is get behind that skin and really understand what does it transpire to in 2022, where multiple generations have now been born right the way across the planet. And importantly, you've got this incredible community of South Asians that now call Uganda back home. The power of a single source narrative has always been a very scary proposition for many countries out there, because essentially what it does, it perpetrates a stereotype. Stereotypes are often untrue, but unless unchallenged, they remain the only evidence that the world would judge you upon. And I think that has been the case for a country like Uganda. A lot of people have still only looked at it through the eyes of the likes of Idi Amin, through the atrocities that took place in the past, that has negated where it's now headed to. For the last week, I've had some incredible interviews and chances to meet with some of the most wealthiest people of Uganda, as well as some of the most influential in regards to social change. I'll start my voyage off speaking with this remarkable family called Mr. and Mrs. Mehta. The family have been here for multi-generations, and they're almost a cornerstone to Ugandan success. I found myself in the home of Mr. Mehta, which I think would put many five-star hotels to shame, but more importantly, the scenes are something that is more reminiscent of Jurassic Park than it is for what you would expect as a homely state in the far reaches outside of the cities here. When I had the chance to sit down with him, it was a remarkable discussion because both him and his wonderful wife, Mrs. Mehta, amongst a beautiful array of peacocks, were reminiscing about what Uganda means to them. Obviously, it's a nation that they've made their finances in, a country that is home for both their family, the extended family, but it also has a very sentimental place in their hearts. Because as what Mrs. Mehta went on to describe, she said this was a country that offered her salvation. After she came back from Idi Amin, when the forced exile was made happen, she came back to a home that she thought would not be the same. But the fact is, her stuff, most of it, was still intact. The local communities, indigenous communities, celebrated the fact that the family were back in town, and it gave me a reinforced idea of this notion that Ugandanness was much further than the arbitrary factors of skin color. Now, much can be said about this, because obviously there's been other conversations that we've had here, where people quite frankly have said, well, despite our past, our very turbulent past, many people only see them as South Asians within the country who have done extremely well at business. There's a problem with that viewpoint. Evidently, one, it negates the whole idea of social custodianship. The fact that many of these families have fought tooth and nail to make a difference to the very fabric of what the average Ugandan calls life. It also, for many, it feels that there's a lack of validation, that they've been working incredibly hard, behind the benches in most cases, but yet they still suffer the consequence of an ill-informed community at times to know exactly that these people are Ugandans. Now, this isn't widespread, I must admit. We've had several meetings whilst we've been here, and the information feedback has been outstanding. But before I go into the private sector, with the limited discussions we've had so far, let me give you my experiences of this remarkable location with the dusty streets. You have cows walking through, you have monkeys in the trees, you have some remarkable birds, and beetles that sound almost like car alarms, something that you would expect in the London streets going out there. Uganda is this incredible tapestry of not just personalities, but of ideas. You have those from the villages who have a very different perception of what community custodianship is. When you go through the streets of downtown Kampala with traffic intact, you'll see those who are related to the Maasai tribes They'll be walking through selling a plethora of sandals, looking to make their way through life. You see other street hawkers and obviously the very famous Buddhas, motorcyclists, gangs that you would imagine would belong to the Hells Angels of the US, the numbers in which will absolutely surprise most. These are people, taxis, on motorbike, the steel horses of the world, making its way through like a tilapia through the seas. They will weave in and out of the cars, taking passengers young and old, many at a time. But it's a Ugandan way of life. Somehow it works. Even though there may be frustrations in the traffic, you can see that there is a gentleness in the people here. The smiles are genuine, there's authentic conversations, and the laughter is truly infectious. When we go beyond just those aspects, we start looking at the business community here. So some of the other personalities that I had the chance to meet with, I met with this wonderful gentleman, Kamlesh Madhvani. Now, the Madhvani family, again, like the Mehtas, is an institution within the country. And what really struck me with Kamlesh is he's a gentleman that was born in Mumbai. The rest of the family were born in Uganda. And he sees himself as Ugandan. He owns one of the largest businesses here. And he said what was fascinating was at the time of Idi Amin, where the Ugandan Asians were given a choice. You either take your British protectorate passport, or you become Ugandan, take a Ugandan passport, or you find another place to go. Because at that moment in time, his father chose to take on the Ugandan passport, believing that that sentimental value, that idea of nationalism, would be something that protects him. Unfortunately, only a month on, Idi Amin arrested him to send a message that rippled right the way across the South Asian community here, to say, you now have 90 days to leave. What it transpired too was that a passport could not define a person. It still came down to the arbitrary factor of skin colour. Moving on now, what Kamlesh claims is that Uganda is a changing face, that those who are proudly Ugandan, who are recognised as Ugandans, will always be so, and that the elves of the past should not ultimately prescribe the future, dictate it to being one of just racial division, because he believes that the modern day Uganda has changed and learnt from the past. What he now sees is a plethora of activities, but the main challenge is finding jobs for the rising young population. And I suppose that's where the fears lie. That was something that was also echoed by other business leaders in the country. I won't go into fuller names because obviously we do have a documentary and it'd be better for you to see those faces clearly. But some of the conversations that they have has a look at this idea of national prosperity, something that the president went into as well. So whilst we unpick this idea of what defines a Ugandan, I also found my way going through into this remarkable village taken on by my guide here, Michael. Michael is our local partner from Turf Media. And Michael said, Rajan, I need to show you another face of Uganda, something that goes away from the hustling, bustling streets and takes you to quiet, almost sleepy villages that you find a plethora of social activities taking place, where the food is as fresh as it can be, where a cough can be cured by sniffing a leaf as such, and where the Garden of Eden is not just residing in the biblical times. So we found ourselves voyaging through these magnificent streets, even on a Saturday when you'd hope that the world would be asleep and traffic still emerged. And yes, that is going to be something that will come back to haunt us many times on our journeys across Uganda. We found ourselves in an area of his own personal resort. There not only was a fire roaring and the conversation being had, but we found ourselves digging up cassava from the ground, as fresh as it can be. If it had a heartbeat, well, we surely ate it all in all, because we had not only raw cassava, which I've never experienced in my life, but also as you place your hands in the darkened earth here, that is darker than the night sky, you realize there's another aspect that we take for granted of the country, and that is the beauty of its organic structure. And I think that's also participant on the way that the average Ugandan feels. There's a sense of connection, not only to the earth, to nature, but also to each other, to the people. The value system is also showcased in that as well. Whereas we may in the West value corporates, we may value the idea of commercialism, something that is also growing here, something that we've also neglected in the West, in my opinion. Not with all, but with the vast majority that I'm now seeing growing up, is that value of community, of connecting, of spending time, and actually life itself. There's this idea of subsistence that is here within the country. Now, that can be seen in a negative term, but in my case, it's not. We know that there's subsistence farming. You grow what you can eat at this moment in time. But also there's another idea here, which is about friendships, which is about the way that people work. Nobody knows what the future holds, so everybody makes the use of the now. Now, that also has a consequence when it comes to economic policies. But when it comes to the ideas of communities and the way that they talk with each other, the village life is still city life in that sense. That mindset is there. It's creating genuine connections that go further than just the temporariness of the West. A hi here truly means a hi. A hello and a greeting truly means a greeting. There's a genuineness and a gentleness that you would not find in the Last King of Scotland. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially around the people of Uganda. We're going to go back to the private sector here. We had a chance to meet with another businessman in country called Sadil Ruparelia. Sadil is one of the wealthiest men in Africa. And as we journeyed to his home, which is more cognizant of a Hollywood movie track, he offered us cigars and the finest scotches as we sat down to do the interview with him. In the due course of the interview, we had this incredible discussion having a look at, well, where is Uganda heading? And why is it important to tell the other narrative? And so Sadil's own words, it was more akin to saying, there's more to Uganda than most people realize. As a consequence of coming back to Uganda after returning when the President Museveni over 25 years ago made a statement and an absolute declaration to showcase to the globe that Uganda has moved forward and people should be coming back, he chose to also return from these humble beginnings of finding himself in the other sides of the UK, the ones that we do not mention. He found himself setting up becoming a taxi driver, buying houses, and then taking the plunge to come back. At that moment in time, Uganda was a very different place. Where it is now, he's one of the biggest real estate providers in the country. So he owes his success to the country. He owes his success to not just the government of the day, but the people of the day, where consumer power is now growing. It's a very far cry from what we see on the BBC on a daily basis. If we go further, I had the chance to meet with Property Services, a lovely, lovely brother called Pradeep and his wonderful family. He's been almost mentoring us and putting us through the inner circles of Ugandanness. Through him, we've been able to chance to meet with a lot of people. But before I speak about them, Pradeep's own journey within this country is fascinating. I have never met an individual who's so patriotic that it makes you think of a new way in which we can view countries. This is a gentleman that within his own interview, you can see that his eyes started to glare up. And this went beyond the type of commercial bravado that people have. This was a genuine connection to a country that he calls home. His family never left Uganda, even when you had the likes of Idi Amin there. He showed me that there's another side to this. That despite the expulsion of Asians, that there were some Asian families that not only remained, but under Idi Amin also still tried to help change the very fabric of what Uganda was going through. This, again, is a very fascinating discussion because it challenges our ideas of what this historical past is. Again, for many, Idi Amin is a Kruger of sorts. He'll come and attack you in your dreams of those businesses that were once made and take away everything that you owed or that you belonged to. But that wasn't purely the case, even in the likes of the Museveni family, when the Mavali family, the senior member that was left here, was arrested and released, he was told to go back to that region to take over the sugar factories. It was quickly seen that without that support, the very fabric of Uganda will continue to fail. But he has gone on to not only serve in his local jurisdiction here and make a pivotal difference by bringing lights and executing some of the biggest ideas, but he's also made a change in the way that people look at the country. This has also been reinforced by many of the interview pieces, but one in particular that I think was a fascinating glimpse, and that's actually with our ambassador here in Uganda, which is Odrick. Now, you would have heard Odrick's interview piece many moons ago, along the likes of Lord Sheikh, who spoke about this idea of Ugandanness, along the lines of some other people who are involved with us. Odrick spoke about the idea of trade, and that the ideas of Uganda, just a very simple fact of how people look at this notion of Ugandanness to be, has actually harmed the brand of Uganda. And it's something that needs to be changed, something that needs to be challenged, because it is true, we live in a world of the Instagram and TikTokers. Countries are made or broken by simple stories, and as we enter the regions of political correctness, where sustainability is in the lips of most, but not in the consciousness of economic policy making, well, we see a very different world emerging. And that was something that Odrick looked to take on. We spoke about some of the most incredible discussions that you could think of. Post-Brexit, the Commonwealth, whether there is a commonality in our people and communities that can define and redefine our notion of non-traditional partnerships. We re-looked at what Uganda offers the world through the global value chains. These are conversations that many within the West, I must say, and many within our own subcontinent regions would never be expecting from this country. It does punch above its weight when it comes to the intellectual ideas that can reshape nations, something that was also redefined by the president. Now, this has been a monologue of sorts because I don't want to spoil the fun of next week's podcast and the following one, where we start to bring together the voices of those companies who truly represent Uganda, who have also supported us along the journey. But I want to leave you with this idea whilst you continue your days wherever you are in the world. If you were defined by a single narrative that was formed 50 years ago, would that be fair to you, your company, or your country? And when you have a look at a country of Uganda, where the South Asians have come back, and it is not the Garden of Eden of sorts where everything has been kumbaya, there are challenges like many emerging markets. But when you do look back at a country like Uganda, where the Asians have now returned, we have the Chinese community that have come in numbers, where over 1.4 million refugees have now come in, who have not only been accepted, but the communities within those regions have taken active measures to make sure that they feel that they are home, that they are protected, that they do not go hungry. Well, when you have a look at all that information, how does it re-challenge your notion of Uganda? Now, as you all know, we'll be doing a documentary on Uganda that will be launched fairly soon. It will give you a glimpse to what Uganda truly means, what it represents, and more importantly, where it's heading with the relevant people behind it. If you'd like to find out more about our journey through Uganda and some of the articles that have reshaped the notions of nationalism, come along to the website. It's www.globalindianseries.com. As always, I'd like to say a massive thank you to all of you across the world in the 48 nations that you listen in from for listening in to these podcasts. Because with your support, we continue building the world's largest living encyclopedia of people just like us. But more importantly, we get to challenge the many misconceptions around the world head on. And I believe, like you, that by challenging these misconceptions, by challenging the stereotypes, not only do we strengthen our bonds with each other as a human civilization, but we also start to alleviate many of the ills in society. And it's only then that we can truly celebrate what it means to be human. Until next week, I hope all remains well. I know this is a slightly different podcast. It is my monologue of sorts, the poetry of going through Uganda, and I haven't even mentioned the beautiful skies the amazing smells, and also some of the most incredible drinks and cuisines. And I have yet to taste the Rolex, but I'm going to save that for next week. So this is me bowing out from Kampala, and still at the early hours before the whole world wakes up, to ensure that you know and that you're fully informed about the ideas that re-challenge and re-change a nation. Take care for now.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.